Good morning, guys. Am I audible to all of you?
Yes,
Good morning, sir.
Okay. And my screen is also visible to all of you, right?
Right.
Right. So today, basically, we are going to discuss three important concepts, right? One is temp data, and the second thing what we are going to discuss two state management techniques, right? So one is cookies, and another one is session. So let us start the discussion with this temp data. So what is this temp data? Why we need to use temp data? We have already ViewBag and ViewData. Why then temp data? Right? What we can do with ViewBag and ViewData and how we can achieve that thing, right? Using ViewBag and ViewData, using temp data. Right? All these things we are going to discuss. So as you already discussed in our previous sessions, we have many techniques, right? Using which we can pass the data from controller action method to a view. One is view data. We can use ViewBag. We can use strongly typed models, pass the data from the controller action method to a view. Now we will see another approach of sending the data from controller action method to a view, right? And that is using temp data. But basically, we never used this temp data from sending the data from the controller action method to a view. The temp data purpose is something different, which we are going to discuss, right? And how we can override the limitation of a view data and view back using temp data. That is what we are going to discuss. The limitation of a view bag and a view data is they are limited to only one HTTP request, right? So they are only limited to one HTTP request. So if redirection occurs, their value becomes null, meaning they will lose the data they hold. See, basically, what is the limitation of a view bag and view data? They are limited to one HTTP request only. If redirection occurs, right, they will lose their value, right? If once one request we have sent, and once that's request completed, if we access for another action method, then they will not hold the data anymore. We will get null value. But in real-time application, we may need to pass the data, right? Some small amount of data from controller action method to another controller action method within the same controller to a different controller. Then in situations like this, we need to use temp data in ASP.NET Core MVC application. Let us first understand what is the problem that what we are facing with view data and the temp data. Let me create two variables. One is you can say one is temp data. Already one variable is there inside my home controller using temp data where it is holding the title property. So similar way, I'm creating another property ViewBag dot some property and some property, and here I'm storing some data. Okay, so let me give the different things. So I'm putting the key as a name, and I'm storing here 2035, whatever the age. And here inside the temp, right? So here I'm going to use the view data, and here I'm putting the name as Pranay. So these are the two properties. Now I can access these two properties inside the index view. Okay, now go to the index view, and here what I can say, I can just creating some, it's three elements, right? And here I'm using a @ viewbag dot edge, and what is the next property? Right, @ view data, and what is the property name? The name of the property is name, right? So what I'm trying to do is I'm also putting the same two property inside the privacy page, right? So I'm putting the same two property also here, viewback.s, viewback.name. Now, if I run the application, then this two property is accessible within the index view. But whenever we access the privacy page, right, then at that time you will see this data is not there. Right? Let me show you this thing practically. See, you can see this 35 point runner. Now I'm going to the privacy page. See, I'm not getting the data. Okay, so to make you sure what I'm going to do, I'm going to do some kind of changes. So what changes? I'm putting this as age and I'm putting name first. Right. So this is one of the use case, and here I'm putting this one. Okay. Now, okay, let me run this using IIS Express so that this screen will not come. Okay. See, name and age I'm getting in the home page. But once I go to the privacy page, you can see name and age is not available. What it means? It means the limitation of both ViewData and ViewBag is they are limited to one HTTP request, right? So once the request completed, you can see home page, you are getting the data. That means once you request the index action method, once the index action method is executed, whatever the ViewBag and ViewData you created, they are destroyed. If you request for another page, then you will not get the data. As point is clear, guys? They are having only limited to one HTTP request. Clear?
Sir,
Yes
in
or no?
second case, we are not getting the data. That means it's
Yeah.
losing the data, right? Here.
Sorry?
In the second
Obviously.
case, we are not. In the second case, it's not showing the data here, right? In the privacy policy.
So you are explaining me or what you are asking? What is your question?
I'm asking the name and age fields are not displaying here in the second page.
Obviously, it is not a displaying means what? The data is lost, no? They are not holding the data. Once the request completed, the ViewBag and ViewData is destroyed from the cache and from the memory, from the server. And this is the reason why you are not getting the data.
Okay.
Clear?
Yes.
So the second thing is once the redirection occur, they also their value becomes null, meaning they will lose the data they hold. For example, okay, let me do some changes, right? Currently, this is my index view, right? And from the index view, I'm not returning the view, right? From this index action method, I want to redirect it to a different action method. So for that purpose, what I need to do, return, sorry, you have to write return redirect to action, right? So from this action method, I want to redirect it to a different action method, either within the same controller or within the different controller. So here you can say I'm saying the privacy. Privacy means within the same controller, it is going to check for a method whose name is privacy. Even though if you want, you can also specify the controller name. So in this case, suppose I don't want to use this overloaded version, then I can also specify the controller name like this. Action name, then you can say what is the controller name, home. So in that way you can redirect from one action method to another action method, either within the same controller or within a different controller. So in this case we are redirecting to an action method whose name is privacy within the home controller in the sense it is within the same controller. If you are having some student controller, then also you just need to write the student here, right? So once you write student, then from this action method, it will redirect the request to the student controller privacy action method. You want to pass some data, then you need to create one route object value, right? So that is what new object, right? Anonymous type, you know, guys, what is anonymous object? So you need to create one anonymous object, right? And if the method is taking some parameter, for example, let me say this action method taking some integer uh, name parameter, right? So here you can also pass something like this integer name equals to this name equals to some data, right? Some data like this you can also pass. Clear? So how you can redirect from one action method to another action method, either within the same controller or to a different controller. So for that purpose, you need to use redirect to action method. Clear, guys?
Mm.
Yes.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Right? So here you have to use redirect to action, right? So for the now we are just redirecting to the same controller privacy method, right? So you can use this overloaded version, even though if you use that, that is also going to work, right? But we will discuss this thing in detail in our upcoming sessions. How you can pass one data, how you can pass multiple data, how you can set a default value. All these things we are going to discuss. But for now, we are just redirecting to this privacy action method. But if you remember, within the privacy view, right? Within the privacy view, go to the view, we are also accessing these two things, right? Now, once the redirection occur, even though within the same HTTP request, but it redirect from one action method to another action method, this ViewBag and ViewData, they lose their property. They lose their value. Let us prove this, right? Now, if you run the application, it will start executing the index action method, but once it start executing, then again it will redirect it to the home privacy, right? So to prove these things, what I'm going to do, I'm putting a debugger point here also and a debugger point here also. Now what I'm trying to do, I'm clicking on the home button. So you can see index action method is hit, right? So press F10, press F10, press F10. And from here, it will redirect to the privacy action method. See, so when it redirect to the privacy action method, again the home controller executed, right? Again the home controller means again an instance of this class is created, and then it is going to invoke privacy method, right? So once the URL, see, whenever the index method is changed, right? If you are returning a view, if you are specifying the view name here, then the URL is not going to be changed. And whatever the action method name, that is what it is going to change, irrespective of the view what it is rendering. But if you change the URL, say in this case, the URL is being changed. Why URL is being changed? Because the action method execution is being changed. Initially, the index action method execution is started, but from here it redirects the request to a different action method. So whichever action method is going to return the data, right? That action method name is going to be written in the URL. So in this case, which action method is going to return the data? Index action method or privacy action method? Guys,
Privacy.
Privacy.
privacy, right? So as the privacy action method is returning the data, so you will see that privacy, right? Home privacy in the URL. But one thing you need to observe, that name and age is not there. The value is not there. That means when the once the one HTTP request is completed, then in the next HTTP request you cannot access ViewBag and ViewData. In the same way, if redirection occurred, right? Redirection occurred in the sense one action method execution start, and from that action method execution we redirect the execution to a different action method, either within the same controller or within a different controller. Then also view back and view data, they lose their property, right? They lose their value. So to overcome this problem, what we need to do, we need to use temp data. Clear, guys? What is why we need to use temp data? Because there are some limitations with ViewBag and ViewData. What limitations? They can hold data for one request, right? They can only going to pass the data from controller action method to a view. Once the request is completed, they will lose their data. Even if redirection occur, right, from one action method to another action method, they are also going to lose the data. So we can overcome this problem using temp data. Using temp data, we can pass the data from one action method to another action method, either within the same controller or from a different controller. Plus, we can also access the temp data value, right? We can also access the temp data value in the next subsequent request. So let us prove this. So what I'm going to do, instead of using this, what I can say, view data, I'm making this as a temp data of name, and here I'm using this temp data of age. It is like a dictionary, right? It is very similar to your, what I can say, it is very similar to your view data, right? If you go to the definition, then you will see if it is having also both get and set accessor, means you can set the data, you can get the data, right? And again, if you look at the type, so it is iTemp data dictionary. If you go to the definition of item data dictionary, then you will see it is having the I dictionary object, right? Having some method like keep method, keep with string method, pick method, right? What is all this method we will discuss. But for now, you have to remember it is a dictionary of a type string and a object. That means internally, if you are speaking what is data means it is a dictionary object. And inside that dictionary, how it is going to store the data? It is going to store the data, right, in the form of a key value pair, where the key is of type what? Right? Key is of type what? String. And what is the value type? In this case, what type of value it can hold? It can hold
Okay.
object values. An object that might be a null also. Question mark means it is a nullable, right? You can also store null value inside that object, right? So in this case, I have created two variables using temp data, name and age. And I can also go and access this temp data value here, right? So what user need to do, user need to use this one, right? So you can access this thing from here. And even if you go to the privacy page, you can also do the same thing, right? Now from home controller, I'm setting the temp data value and displaying the value. And again, in the privacy controller, I'm accessing the same thing, right? So now run the application. But let me close the debugger. So I'm getting the name and age. Go to the privacy page. I'm not getting the name and age, right? Why I'm not getting the name and age? This is because you can access them inside your action method, not inside your view, right? If you want to use them inside your view, then what you need to do, just access them, store them in somewhere, and pass them as input parameter to your view, right? So let us do the same thing, right? So what I'm going to do is, right? What I'm going to do is, in this case, right? In this case, I'm checking if, right, if there is a temp data, right? If I'm going to the temp data dot contents key, right? If the temp data contains this particular key called age, right? Contains this particular key dot age, then it's a string value. String key is always of type string, so you need to pass the string age, right? Then do whatever you want to do with the data. Similarly, what I'm going to do, I'm creating another if else condition and where I'm checking the age, right? So, and then what I'm going to do, I'm going to page the temp data, and here I don't want to use temp data because it is very, right, bad from performance point of view. View bag that age, and what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to access the temp data. And again, this age is of integer type. So what I need to do, I need to convert this into integer, right? So this is how I can access. Similarly, what I need to do, I need to use a view back property, right? So view back, and here I can store view back. So basically what I mean to tell you is, right? So once you have this temp data inside this action method, in the next request, right, in the subsequent request, you can access the temp data value, right? But within the controller action method, not within the view, right? And within this action method, you can have this data. Once you have the data, you can store them inside some view bag, right, or view data property and use them inside your views, right? So let me go to the privacy page. Instead of using view data, so this, I'm going to use this one. I'm not preferring to use view data because view data is bad from the performance point of view, and view bag, right, it is going to give better performance as compared to view data. So now I'm going to do all these changes, right? So basically what I want to tell you is, I want to show you is this name data and name is defined inside the action method index, right? And from this action method, I want to redirect to the privacy page. And once I redirect it to the privacy page, then in the privacy page, I want to access these two data. But earlier we have seen if we are using ViewBag and ViewData, once the redirection occur, they lose their value. So in this case, I'm checking, right? I'm checking if this edge property is available in the temp data object, right? Then please access the value. If not available, then it is not going to change, right? Let me run the application and see once the redirection occurred, right? Whether they are having the same data or not, right? So to do this, press F10 button. See, it is going to check the age property and it is checking the age property. Yes, age is available. It is storing the age value. Now it is checking the name property. Yes, name is available. So it is going to check the name property, right? So in this case, it is throwing one exception, throwing one format exception. Can anybody tell me why I'm getting this exception?
The
Uh,
name
Name
is
is
cost is
string set.
integer.
Exactly. So because we are getting this exception because name is a string value and we are trying to convert that into integer. So to overcome this problem, what we need to do, we need to use string method, right? So once we have done these changes, now let me run the application once more, right? We are getting the data as expected or not. That means from this action method, right, the same data is available here also. Even if you don't redirect, right? Now I'm going to show you this thing, right? I'm not going to redirect. First of all, I will access the index action method. Then I will access the privacy action method. Then you will also see that index action method, it is going to display the data. In the privacy action method also, it is going to display the data because the data, the temp data is available for the next subsequent request, right? So now run the application. So in the index page, right, the home index, it is the data is available. Click on the privacy page. Why the data is not available? Is there any issue? They're not available. Why it is not available? Because in
You
this
have to
case,
redirect.
right? Because in this case, we are returning a view. But if we redirect, right, then the data is going to be available, right? For example, if we redirect to this index action method, then in the next subsequent call, right, from this to this, the data is going to be available, right? But now what is my intention? My intention is after redirection, right? Once the request is completed, right? I want to keep the temp data value for the next request. Then what we need to do? So here you need to use temp data dot keep, right? Temp data dot keep method, right? So just write temp data dot keep method and run the application once more, right? This is Pranaya 33 and privacy page Pranaya 35, right? So basically, what is the use of this temp data dot keep method means it will preserve the value for the next request. Once the redirection occur from this action method to this action method, that's fine. We will get the temp data. But once the action method execution completed, right? Like this, in this case, index action method execution completed. In the next action method, I also want to keep this data. Then for that purpose, we need to use this temp data that keep method. And if you go to the definition, what it's saying, mark all keys in the dictionary for retention, right? Mark all the what it means, all the keys in the dictionary for retention. So temp data basically what? It is a dictionary. So whatever keys you have added into the dictionary or into the temp data, you want to keep their value for the next request. Yes, I want to keep. Then please call this keep method, right? No, no, I don't want to keep the value for all the keys. I want to return value for some of the keys. Yes, that is also possible. For that purpose, what you need to do, you need to use string.key method. For example, in this case, I don't want to store this age property, right, for the next subsequent request. So I just want to keep the value for the name property. So just pass this name and then run the application. See, Pranay 35, go to the privacy page. And here you will see only name property value is available, not the other one. Right? So apart from this, there is another method, TempData. What I can say, right? So instead of doing all this typecasting, all these things, so what you can do, you can use this pick method, right? What exactly this pick method is going to do? Returns an object that contains the element that is associated with the specified key without making the key for a deletion. So what it means, right? If you use like this, then once it retrieve the data, then it will not delete the data, it will keep the data for the next subsequent request, right? For example, right? So now with these changes, if you will execute this one, you are getting the data as expected. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to create another action. Let me give this return type as string above. So I'm creating a string variable string age nullable type. I'm storing null integer nullable type. I'm storing the value null in this variable. Uh, I'm creating a string nullable type variable name whose value is null. So instead of this thing, so what I'm going to do, I'm making this as age and I'm making this as name. And finally, what I'm doing, I'm returning, right? So in this case, I'm getting this error because, right? So we need to typecast this, right? String type. Convert dot to string, right? And here, what I'm doing, I'm returning a string. If age equals to null, I'm returning 0 plus if name equals to null, what I'm going to return? I'm going to return no name. I'm just putting some formatter, right? So this is what I'm doing here now. Now let me remove this one. So home page, all the data available. Privacy page, Pranaya is available, right? Now I'm going to the about page. See, in about page, Pranay is available, but the what I can say, the age is not available. Why it is not available? Because say in this case, we are calling this keep method name to preserve the data, right? So in this case, once the temp data value is being used, right, that value is not going to be deleted. So if you go to the view, in this case, we are accessing the value. Once it access the value is going to be deleted from the uh, temp data. But in this case, to return the value, what I'm using the keep method so that the name will be preserved, right? If you are having query question, so let me remove this one. So in this case, it will preserve both name and age for the next request, right? And then the next request, I can access the age and I can access the name property value because we are keeping both. But in this case, if you remember here, I'm only accessing the age value using the temp data. And here I'm using the pick method. So what is the difference between two mechanisms? So in this case, once it access the data from the temp data, it is going to delete the this age property from the dictionary. But in this case, if I am using the pick method, then once it retrieves the data, then it will not delete this name property from the dictionary. Rather, it will keep the name property for the next request. And this is the reason why in the next subsequent request, right, when I'm trying to access this age property, I'm getting the data. If I'm trying to access, right, even though if you access like this pick method, you can get, even if you will access like this, then also it is fine. If you remove this one and if you write like this, right, that is also fine. If you use TempData.keep method, then again it will preserve the value for the next subsequent request, right? So now I'm going to run the application. 35, this is fine. I'm going to the privacy page. I'm getting the data as expected, right? And what I'm going to do this, and next I'm going to the about page. And in the about page, you can see I'm getting the pranaya, but I'm not getting this zero value, right? Now you want to keep the zero value also. Yes, I want to keep. Then what you need to do inside this temp data, you can call the temp data dot to keep method, right? Like this, or you can also call this system data dot keep method, right, by passing the string key name, right? And already name is there, so any one is fine. So in this case, you can pass the age property, that will work. And even if you call this one, that is also going to be work, right? So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to run the application once more. Home page, I'm able to get the value. Private page, I'm able to get the value. And from the about page, right, I'm getting both 35 and 15. So the point that you need to remember is once you access the value from the temp data, right, the data is going to be deleted. This is the reason why if you go to this view, once I access the data, the temp data value is going to be deleted from the dictionary. But to keep the temp data value, I need to use the keep data, right? But in this case, there is also another option. If I'm not accessing the data from the view, and if I'm redirecting to the index action method, right? Even though I'm not calling this keep method, I have not accessed the data from the dictionary. Then it will be available in the next, what I can say, index method. So in this case, also you will get the data. So even though if you want to keep the data for the next subsequent request, right, then you have two options. Either you can call this a keep method, right? And in this version is basically for to keep the data for all the properties, all the keys, whatever they are inside your dictionary. If you want to keep all of them, you need to use this keep method. But ideally, you should not use this one. You should use, right, the name, right? Using this overloaded version, whatever the property name you want to keep, you need to pass them, right? These two options are there. Apart from these two, you can also use this peak method, right? Directly you can access the collection like this, convert the data. Even though it is also possible to use this peak method, but what is the difference? In this case, once it access the data, it will delete this age property from the dictionary. In this case, it will access the data, but it will keep the name property in the dictionary so that you can use that same name in the subsequent request or in the next request. So you have this pick option method, or you can use this keep method. So whichever is used, it will keep the property for the next subsequent request. Clear, guys? Any doubt related to this temp data and what is the difference between your ViewBag, ViewData and temp data? If someone asks you what is the difference between a temp data and a ViewBag or ViewData, you should able to explain the same thing or not?
Yes.
Don't we have something called view.keep or viewbag.keep like that?
No, there is no such method viewbag.keep or what I can say TempData.keep, right? They are properties available inside the controller class, right? If you go to the controller class, right? So you can see this is TempData, right? If you go to the TempData, then you will see this method, right? Now, if you go to
Because yeah,
if you go to
because
the ViewBag, right? Let me show you, right? If I'm going to the definition of a view data, right? There's no such method available here. And if you
because
go to
temp
the
data
view
and
data,
ViewData, they look similar. They're from
no,
it's
no,
also
they
we
look
same
similar.
value.
They look similar, but they are not similar, right? These methods are provided in that class, but that keep method, pick method, they are not available in the view data. They look similar, but their functionality is different. If functionality is same, then why they provide these two mechanisms? They are providing temp data and view data means the role and responsibility is going to be different.
Sir,
Clear,
one
guys?
question.
Yes.
For the keep method, so till how many requests it will keep?
So for the next subsequent request.
Okay, so for peak also, it will just copy the value which is there in the dictionary and it will just
So
keep that value for the
next,
next request
exactly.
only.
Yes, yes, yes. So next request.
Oh,
And in the next request, again, if you call this keep method or keep a like this, or if you call this pick method like this, then again, it will keep the value for the next subsequent request.
okay, only
For
one
example,
time it is retaining.
right, for example,
Correct.
in this about method, I'm accessing these things, right? I'm able to access. Now I'm doing one more method, right? That is contact us, right? So in this case, I'm not calling any pick or keep method. Am I calling anything? No. So now let me run the application and see whether I'm getting the data or not. So privacy, see home method, privacy, it is working. Home method as a redirection is happening. Yeah, that is fine. Now what I'm going to do, I'm calling the about method, right? Data we are getting. Now call the contact method, zero and no name. Because what is that we have said, right? So until and unless you are calling the keep method, pick method, right? The data is available. If, right, if you do not call, then the data is not available.
Okay. Good.
Means
Yeah,
keep and peek have same features.
No, no, pick and keep are not same feature, right? So if you are using this pick means it will return the value and it will preserve the value for the next request. And the keep means it will only reserve the value. It will not return the data.
Okay, okay,
Understand? Na? In this case, it is not going to return the data. If you are calling this keep.h, it is not going to return me the value h. But in this case, peak means it is going to return the value what is there, as well as it will keep the value for the next subsequent request.
okay,
That is what, Pawan, that is what I'm explaining. Keep and peak means what? Keep means it will only preserve the value. If you are using this overloaded version, it will preserve all the values for the next subsequent request. If you are passing the age property, right, age key, it will keep only age, right, for the next request. If you are using pick, it will do the same thing as this one. But here it is going to return the data what is stored inside this, what is the value stored for this name property or name key. But in this case, it is not going to return the value. Clear, guys?
yes,
Sir, all the data that you are getting from the peak or keep these things, you're storing
No,
in
no, no.
ViewBag.
Okay,
Is
okay.
it?
Okay, let me first tell you. Getting all the data from the keep and pick these things. Am I getting any data in the keep? In the case of a keep, I'm getting any data?
No, no. It is just to retain the value.
Exactly.
So, my question was like, we are storing all the data in ViewBag only now. So, is it just because to render the view?
Exactly. In this case, I'm storing this data in the view bag means in the view only I'm going to render the data. Because in the case of right, if in the view I'm going to retrieve the data, right, the data is going to be right. In this case also you can create a view bag temp data, right? Anything you want, you can create, no issue.
So, we can use
uh,
TempData also to render.
Also no issue, no issue. Temp data, right? In the case of a view bag, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use temp data is like this, right? And here I'm going to use TempData name like this, right? And then I'm calling this peak method. That is also fine. So in this case, right, I'm going to go to view. I'm using
Yes.
this edge, right? That is also fine, no issue, right? So
Okay.
this
Can
is
we
privacy page. Now, if you run the application, then also in the privacy page, you will get the data, right? This is home privacy, you are getting the data. Clear?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
And even the if you go to the about page, then also you will get the data.
can we pass this to other controllers and other models, sir? This data.
Yes, yes, definitely will pass. That is what we are going to discuss in our upcoming sessions. Because
Oh,
see, in this case also, right, this is redirect to action, right? This is privacy. So let me create a student controller. Right? That is fine. So that is actually, okay. So what I'm saying, that is actually a task for you guys. I've already written here the syntax, how you can redirect it to another action method of another controller. That is a task to you guys only. I can do this immediately. Create a controller, create a method, right? And then you need to pass the method name, controller name, and any route data, right? If no route data, you can simply remove this one. That is also fine. So in this case, you can see I'm writing code to redirect the action method to student controller privacy method. That is the way the privacy code is implemented here. You can also implement the same thing in here also in the student controller privacy method. If you go to the definition, right, then you will see what exactly it is saying. First one is the action method name, and the second parameter is the controller name. So whichever controller you want to execute, that name you need to pass. Whichever action method you want to execute, that name you need to pass. That's it. Is there any big deal? Any difficulty to understand this concept? Guys, you guys are able to do this by yourself or not? Because even though I'm not going to explain 100%, because I also trying to make you sure that you should do some practices. You should try to learn something new by yourself also. Clear? This is a task to you guys. If you guys are unable to do this, let me know. Again, I will explain this concept. How you can redirect from one action method to another action method. Yes, obviously, once you start discussing the security concept, right? Security concept means the ASP.NET identity. At that time, I'm going to use this concept very clearly, right? Once the user is not logged in, right? If you are accessing something, let me redirect to the login page. Once the login successful, let me redirect it to the home page or any other page, right? All these things we are going to discuss in detail in our upcoming sessions, right? But for now, if you want to understand, create one controller and try to do the same thing and see whether this temp data is available or not. This is a task to you guys, right? Clear, guys?
Yes.
Right. So the next, okay, so few points that we need to discuss. Lifetime temp data persists across a single request. Once the data is read, it's removed from the temp data by default, right? By default, once you read the data from the temp data, then the data is going to be removed. Temp data is typically stored in a session state, which means in occurs, right, some storage and
Correct.
performance overhead associated with the session, right? So basically, what exactly it means? It means to store the temp data, it uses some session state. Session state means what I can say is you can consider it's a temporary storage, temporary caching mechanism it uses. Right? There is some cache where it is going to store the data in the form of a key and a value pair. And whenever you are creating more number of temp data in your application, that means more number of a key and value is going to stored in the cache. Means more number of memory it is going to utilize. So you have to consider while using the temp data because you might get some performance penalty. Keys used to store and retrieve the temp data should be of string type. You should use consistent and unique keys to avoid conflict, right? So in this case, what I'm saying, like if you are creating two temp data with the same key name, right? Then you will not get any compilation error. So in this case, you will not get any compilation error. right? So, but you will not get the data as appropriate, but you will not get the appropriate data. Whichever the temp data, update the value last, right? That what you will get. So while you are using, please try to make the temp data as unique as possible. Temp data store data as object, so typecasting is required, and you can see here we are doing typecasting, right? So here I'm doing typecasting. Here it is internally storing the data in the right object, right? But if I'm trying to store something inside this variable, then typecasting is mandatory. Whether you use temp data that pick method or this indexer, right? No matter, typecasting is required, right? Temp data is meant for small amount of data, like small messages, small object, and not for larger. If you are having a collection of students, don't store them inside the temp data because it will take more memory uh, in your server. Not for AJAX request. Temp data is not suitable for AJAX request, and it is based on server side redirect, right? If you are trying to call this, right? If you are trying to call this contact method using AJAX call, then you will not get this temp data, right? Temp data is basically for server side redirection. So you are having inside this index method and you want to redirect it to this action method privacy, then you can get the temp data value, right? So that is what this is. Remember, temp data is best suited for short-lived data that needs to be written only for the next request. If you need to store data for a longer duration, consider using mechanism like session state or cookies or database. So next, what I'm going to discuss these two things: session state and a cookies, right? And the database. Once we start discussing, then we will explain these things. Right? So can anybody tell me what is cookies? Anybody having any idea what exactly a cookie is, right? How exactly the cookie works in any kind of web applications? Because I know most of the people here are working professional. Working professional means they definitely somehow they might definitely they have used the concept called cookies sessions in their applications, right? Can anybody explain me what exactly a cookie, what exactly a session, how the cookie is worked in web application, how the session is worked in web application? Can anybody have any idea?
So cookies and sessions are used to store data.
Yes, but where?
Cookie
Uh,
on the client
For the
side or
browser.
session on the
Client
server
side.
side.
Client
The
side.
session is
Both
stored
are
on
you?
the server side.
Okay, so cookie is going to store the data on the client machine and session is going to store the data on the server side, right?
Yes.
Yes, that is fine. How it is going to use the, right, how it is going to store the data in the server side, how it is going to store the data in the client side, how they are interacting with each other. Can you elaborate?
Cookies are stored in the browser as key value pairs and
That is fine. That is fine. Cookies are stored on the client side means it is only in the browser. Server side means wherever the application is hosted, that is fine. But how they internally work, that is what I want to know. Who
cookies are
created, how they,
sent along, sir. And based on cookies, they identify the session.
that is not my question, right? Okay, let me explain this thing, right? Because you guys know what exactly cookie, right? You guys know that cookie is going to be stored in the client side, essence is going to be stored in the server side, right? But why? Why I'm going to store this thing in the client side? Why I'm going to store? Why? First of all, you guys tell me why cookie?
As there is a frequent request, so easily get the data.
Right? But why?
For communication between the server and the client. Server has to reply
Exactly.
client.
But why? My question is still why? For the server communication, that is fine. But why cookies? Why server sessions? If I'm not using cookies and sessions, then why? When the point that what I want to hear from you guys, that particular term I'm not getting from you.
To
To
maintain
identify,
state
to
management.
reduce the request response cycle,
No. So see,
To
identify the
maintain the
user,
no,
To reduce the number of requests to the server.
no,
to maintain the state.
no. What I mean is, whatever you are giving partial answer. But main objective, what is the use of a cookie? That is what you are not telling. Right. Remember,
Personalization and when
To
the
maintain the state of the data.
right? Why I'm going to maintain the state of the data using cookies? Right. So the point that you need to remember is, so whenever there is a client-server communication, it uses something called HTTP protocol. Right or wrong?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
HTTP is a stateless protocol.
HTTP is a stateless protocol. What do you mean by stateless protocol?
It doesn't retain the data between request and response after a request and
Exactly.
response. To
Exactly.
preserve
So
the data, we need to use the cookies.
exactly. So stateless protocol means the software is not going to store any information related to the client on the server side. So it is the responsibility of the client to send each and every information to process the request by the server. So if from the same browser I'm sending two requests, right? From the same browser, if I'm sending two requests to the server is not capable to identify this request is coming from the same browser or from a different browser, because HTTP protocol are a stateless protocol, and over the internet we use this concept called HTTP, means the server is not capable to remember the client request, whether the request is coming from the same client or the request is coming from a different client. The server is unable to identify. So for that purpose, what the server is doing is creating something called session and cookies. Then this session and cookies, when the first request which come, right, this session and cookie, it will created by the server only, right? And then it will send that session and cookie to the client. From the next request onward, the client needs to send the cookie, right, in the request. And that request once comes to the server, then by looking at the session and cookies, he will identify that yes, this request is coming from this browser, right? So let us try to understand this thing practically, and what I can say. First, I will explain this concept theoretically, then I will implement this practically, right? The communication between a server and a client on the web uses HTTP protocol, right? So HTTP protocol means it is a stateless protocol. So because of this stateless protocol, right, the server, what I can say, session and cookies concept comes into the picture. So this means that information will not be automatically stored between the two requests by the user. If the user sends two requests from the browser, then this information is not going to be stored anywhere. Anywhere in the sense it is not going to stored in by the server. Instead, cookies and sessions must be used to share the information between the requests, right? So if you want to share some information between multiple requests, then you need to use something called cookies and sessions. So this is useful in situations such as keeping a keeping a user logged in between requests, right? Suppose you are sending multiple requests, you do not need to send the username and password each and every time, right? And you do not need to check the logic, right? Whether the user is valid, all this thing again and again. So in that case, you can make use of session and cookies. And by looking at the session and cookies, right, you can say, yes, the user is logged in. Apart from this, many useful use cases, right, which I'm also going to discuss, right, where most of the real-time applications uses this concept called cookies and server, right? And nowadays, most of the server-side technologies have built-in cookie support, right? Let me first explain this cookie, then I will explain this session, right? Most of the server-side technologies, right, whatever you take into consider, PHP, Java, .NET, .NET Core, all these server-side technologies have inbuilt support for cookies, and including ASP.NET Core framework, right? Dealing with cookies made it easy by this HTTP context class. So if you remember from the day one, I'm saying this it's because of this HTTP context class, each middleware component, right, can access the request and response because of this HTTP context class. And again, because of this HTTP context class, we can make use of these cookies very easily, right? How we can make it practically, we will see. What is a cookie? So basically, a cookie is nothing but a small text file that a website store on a user computer or mobile. Suppose you are accessing one website using your computer laptop. Even though it is also possible to access the website on a mobile device, right? So whenever you access a website from either your mobile phone or from your computer, right? Then cookie is going to be store some text file, right? Either on your computer device or from your mobile device. This file contains information that can be used to identify the user, such as their login status or preferences, right? So I'm just saying login status or preferences, but you can store anything. And this text file is sent back to the website with every subsequent request. And this is going to be stored on the client side, on the browser, and on each subsequent request, not for the first request. In the first request, we do not have that cookie. From the second request onward, or once we get the cookie from the server, then from the next request onward, for each and every request, we need to send this small text file to the server. Typically, it is used to tell the web server if two requests are coming from the same branch. So basically, what is the advantages? By using this cookie, we are just telling to the web server that yes, hey, Mr. Web Server, I'm not a new, it is not a new request. It is I'm not a new user, or it is not a new request, right? Yes, it is a new request, but previously I have also accessed some of your resources, and this is the proof, right? Please check and verify whether I am accessing this for the first time or I have already accessed your website, right? So cookies are stored, and how these cookies are stored, it is going to stored in the form of a key helper. How it is going to store practically, I will show you, right? And you can take advantages of these cookies, right? To read, to write, and to delete the values, right? For better understanding, how exactly the cookies work, look at this image. So this is your client. Client means you can say this is web browser, and this is your server. Server in the sense web server where your website is hosted. So the client initially first makes one HTTP request to the server. The server, what is the responsibility of the server? The server is going to check the request header, right? The server will, what I can say, take the request data, process the request data, generate the HTTP response. Along with the HTTP response, what the server responsibility is, it is going to create one cookie, and it is going to set that cookie in the response header using the set cookie properties, right? So whenever the client gets the response, right, along with the HTTP response, whatever data you are want to return, along with that data, if you look at the response header of that particular request, then inside that response header, you will find a property whose name is set cookie, and inside that set cookie property, whatever data the server sent, that data you can also see here. And how the data is going to be represented there? It is going to be represented in the form of a key value pair, right? So you will see set cookie colon, then what is the key name value, and key name value like this, it is going to return the data. Practically, we will see this thing. And once the data received, right, from the next request onwards, again the client wants to send the request, another request, then he will send the request. But along with this request, so what the client will send, so in the previous step, he gets the cookie. So in the set cookie header, right? In the next request, whatever the cookie he received, he will send that cookie information in the request header. In this case, in the response time, he is getting the cookie in the response header with this property name, set cookie. And while he is making another request, right, to the client, to the server, so he needs to pass the cookie information, whatever the key value pair he received in the previous request, that key value pair he will pass using this property called cookie in the request header. Once the server receives the request, he will check the request data, all these things, Along with, he is also going to check the request header, and from the request header, he will get the cookie information. From the cookie information, he will identify what key is there, what value is there, and accordingly, he can use those key value, cookies information to process the request. And once he process the request, again he will return the response. But this time, he is not going to return the set cookie header because it's only for the one time. The server is not going to return the set cookie again and again. But this set cookie is stored in the client browser. And when the client again send the request, again he is going to set the same cookie in the request, right? That cookie is going to be written only one. Until and unless that cookie is not expired, right? The server is not going to set the cookie again and again. And the client is going to use the same cookie again and again. And once you get the cookie, once the cookie is not deleted from your browser, the client will send the cookie again and again in the request header. It is the responsibility to check and validate whether the cookie is valid or not, the cookie is expired or not, and all these things, it is going to be checked by the web server. Clear, guys, how exactly the cookies work? I will show you practically how this set cookie is set in the response order, how the client is going to set the cookie, how we can create the cookie in our application. Practically, I will show you everything, but this is how the cookie is working in your application. Clear, guys? Yeah. Clear? See, if having any query route, right? Once we do the examples, once I will show you how exactly this is working. I will again come to this diagram, and at that time you will understand this thing very clearly. So two types of a cookie. One is a persistent cookie, and one is non-persistent cookie, which is also called as a session. So now let us first understand this persistent cookie, and then I will explain the session cookie. So persistent cookie means it is a long-term cookies, right? That can be stored across multiple sessions. The written information such as login credential, user preferences, allows users to have personal experience when they visit a website, right? So non-persistent. So persistent means cookie means you can consider it is a long-term cookie. No matter how many times your session is created, session is deleted, right? The cookies exist. And non-persistent cookie or session cookie means you can consider it's a temporary cookie, right? That is also right. That is going to be deleted whenever you close the session of your application, right? I'll show you both these examples. Now let us first understand how we can read, write, and delete cookies in ASP.NET Core applications, right? So writing a cookie. So first of all, if I want to use the cookie, I need to create a cookie where I need to store some informations, right? So for creating cookies, what we need to do, we need to use the cookie option class, which is provided in ASP.NET Core MVC. It's not MVC, it is ASP.NET Core, right? You can use this concept in MVC application, Razor-based application also, right? So first of all, you need to create an instance of a cookie options class. And once you create an instance of a cookie options class, then you need to set the expire time, right? Expire time means when the cookie is going to be expired, right? So you can set as you can say, add days, any number of days you can add. 7 days, 10 days, 365 days, 1000 days, how many long you want your cookie to be stay in the client browser, that time you can set here. And to store some data into the cookie, right, you need to use this response dot, right? So basically what our intention is, we need to store the cookies inside the client browser. Means what? Means whenever we are returning the response to the client, right, at that time we need to store the cookie information in the response header, right? So for that purpose, what I need to do, we need to use response dot the cookies, right? And then we need to use this append method to append the cookie. And as I already told you, cookie means it is going to store the data in the form of a key value pair. So this is nothing but my key. This is my value, and you need to pass this option object, because this option object is going to determine, right, how long the cookie is going to be stay inside the client browser. Second, any number of a key value pair you can add. Here I'm adding user ID, here I'm adding username, and I'm also passing the required values, and then I'm passing the option object, right? So
Sir,
this
that's
cookie, sorry,
7 days you mentioned, right? But on the client,
Sorry. I'm not getting what you were asking.
Sorry. So expired option, you said we can set any number of days. Now, example, you said 7 days, right? So
Yes.
when the client machine reboots, that cookie will expire.
Hey, see, whenever we are returning the response, at that time, in the cookie only, he is going to mention the time, right? So that time is going to be used by the client. So what I'm saying, whenever the cookie is returned, don't think that this user and ID and username is going to be there. Along with this expire time is also going to be there. And as long as the cookie is not expired, the client browser going to use the same cookie again and again. Once expired, then it will not use this. Clear?
This cookie is saved in the browser, meaning in the RAM only, right? Sir?
Sorry?
It's a cookie, that value will be saved in the browser, meaning in the computer RAM only, right? It's
It
a
is
memory.
inside your computer hard disk, not in the RAM. RAM is what? You just tell me what is the use of a RAM? RAM is nothing but your working memory.
Yeah. Yes.
It's
So
physically,
cookies
it is
saved
not going
in
to
the,
store. So inside your browser, suppose you are creating up the browser, right? Whenever you are accessing that time, it is going to store in the client machine, right? So this is not the related to where exactly RAM, what is a hard disk, right? We have already separate session in the series of, I have explained those things in detail, right? How the application execution happen, right? How computer access the RAM, all these things, this is already I have explained in my C# session, right? So I'm not going to discuss any C# related concept in this .NET code. You should know how exactly the RAM utilizes the computer, right? Right. Whenever I'm executing any application, how the RAM is utilizes the application code, how the EX is going to be, right? So in this case, first of all, you need to remember that this is not your server. Whenever you run your server, and right, whenever you execute any application, whatever variable, whatever all these things created, right, those are going to be utilized by yourself. So this is not related to your RAM, right? So this cookie option class having many properties like a domain, from which domain you want to what I can say, associate this cookie, right? But basically, you don't, if you don't want to set anything, right, you can set the path as // means from any domain, right, you can access the, you can store the cookie. Expire time means you need to set when that cookie is going to be execute. Secure means if you want that cookie should be accessed via HTTPS protocol. HTTP only means you cannot access this from JavaScript. You only need to access via what I can say HTTP request, right? Maximum age means what is the maximum age set for the cookie, right? But if you are setting this expire time, this max age is not essential, and each essential property basically indicate, is it mandatory to use cookie in order to access your application properly? If yes, then it will bypass some of the consent right policy, which is set by the government, right? If you say many governments having, right, if you say, if you are having any kind of website, right, they are saying, please accept the cookie. Right. Once you accept the cookie, then only you are able to visit the websites, and you are able to, right? Which Jitendra Mahant, what exactly is doing? Right. So don't put these things inside this screen, right? So don't do anything on the screen, which Jitendra Mahant. Okay. Right. Okay. So now, so basically, essential means if it is mandatory to store some cookie in the client browser in order to access the application, right? So basically, if you visit any website, then you might getting some cookies information, accept cookies, right? That means it is mandatory to accept the cookies so that they will store the data inside your computer, right? And once you accept, then you can access the application properly. And that is what, if you want to set, then you need to use this each essential property, and you need to set its value to true. By default, it is false, right? So now, how to create a cookie? So first of all, you need to create an instance of a cookie option class. You need to set the expire time, and you need to append the cookie, right? Whatever information you want to store using the key value pair. User ID, user right, and the corresponding value, username corresponding value. And the third parameter is nothing but your cookie option. And using this cookie option, you can set some of the things like this, whether you want to access this using HTTPS or not, right? Whether you want to access, you do not want to access this using from client-side JavaScript, right? All these things. Once you set the cookie, right, then you want to read the cookie. For reading the cookies purpose, then what you need to do? See, once I'm creating the cookie, I need to write the data, right? Once I'm creating the cookie, I need to write the data in the response header. And this is the response. This is the reason why you can see I'm using the response object response.cookies, right? But while I'm reading the data, right, the server when it going to read the data, then the client sending the cookie in the request header. Request header, you can see client sending the HTTP request, and inside the request header, cookie is there. When the server is sending the response, then in that time it is setting the cookie in the response header. But while it is reading it is going to read the data from the request header. So for that purpose, you can see I'm using a response, right, not this one. So I'm going to use request.cookies. From the request header, I'm reading the cookies, and whatever the ID, that what I need to provide. String value you can directly read. Integer value you need to do typecasting. And again, if you want to delete a cookie, then what we need to do? So you know from the server that I'm writing the cookie, right? The server is writing the cookie into the response. So from the so from the response.cookies collection, you need to call this delete method, and to this delete method, you need to pass the user ID, right? Whichever queue you want to delete, that what you need to provide here. So let us understand this with one example, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to modify this home controller class. So this is my home controller class. I'm going to modify this one, right? So I'm creating one cookie user ID constant variable and cookie username constant variable. So even though it is not required, you can also hard coded here. You can also hard coded user ID. You can also hard coded username here. So here you can see I'm creating an instance of a cookie option class. I'm setting the expire type to 7 days. So 7 days, you can also consider 365 days. Any days you want, you can set here. So I'm setting the 7 days. I'm adding two key value pair to the cookies response header, right? So response.cookies, and using the append keyword, append method, I'm providing the key as user ID. So whatever value is there, user ID, right? If you are getting confused, you can also pass something like this. So basically, if I'm using cookie name, username, variable name here, then what is the value that will become the key while it is storing the data into the cookie, right? Then the value, whatever I'm passing, and this is my option object. This is the index action method. And if you go to the view, right? If you go to the index view, right? Let me go to the view. Right? I will come to this view part later. And this is my about action method. So in this case, this is the first request. When the request comes, it is setting the cookie in the response header, which is going to be stored in the client browser. And the next request, the client making a request to the about action method. And in this case, what I'm doing, I'm just trying to retrieve the cookie information, right? So how you can retrieve? So from the request object, from the cookies header, please get me the cookie user. So whatever the username, this username, whatever value is there, that is what it is going to return. Cookie from the request header, from the cookies properties, please return me the user cookie, right? What is the user ID? Key, the corresponding value, please return me. That is what it is going to return, and then it is going to return the data, and that is what you can see in the browser. And this is another privacy page. And inside this privacy page, I'm going to show you how you can access the cookie data. See, in this case, you are accessing the cookies data directly using the request.cookies. But from a view, how you can access these cookies data? Right? Directly, you cannot access this requested cookies inside a view, you need to use some other mechanism. What mechanism? That is what I'm going to discuss after some time. And if you want to delete the cookie, then what you need to do? You need to delete the cookie from the response header. So you need to write response.cookies.delete method. Whichever cookie you want to delete, that cookie ID you need to pass here. So this is how you can add cookie into the response header. This is how you can get the cookie from the request header. And this is how you can delete the cookie from the response header. So whenever you are deleting and adding, you need to use the response object. And whenever, right, you are reading the data from the request, right, reading the cookies, then at that time you need to use the request header. Clear, guys?
Sir, one doubt here. So
Yes.
whenever we say action method, actual controller, that is nothing but a server, right? For us now.
So this is what you are seeing here. It is nothing but your server.
Yeah. So this is
Browser
nothing
means
but our.
yes, this is nothing but your server where the actual processing is going to happen. Whenever I'm opening the browser, that is nothing but your client.
Yeah. So now when the client client will send a request first come to this index action method. So we are not.
It's not index action method. Client may be request for the about action method. The client may be request for the privacy action method, anything.
Okay, so from the what I meant is like first only we are assigning the response with the user ID and this
See, I'm
email.
just going to show you, but basically what you need to do, you need to provide some login method, right? Once the user login successfully, then you need to store the username and user ID into the response header, right? So that is what, but I'm not we have not yet implemented such functionality. So I'm just trying to show you how you can make use of a session, how you can make use of cookies, right?
Okay.
You can create the cookie anywhere. You can store anything. What is
Okay,
your
so
exactly query? What is your query?
because my query was like we are setting the response object with the user ID and this thing, and in about we are accessing it. So just for that I got confused. Like by this,
No,
what we
exactly.
set only what we are using, or it is one which come from client.
Right. So basically, what I'm trying to do is let's assume this is nothing but your login method. Once the user is logged in, I'm going to store the user information into the cookie. That is what my intention. So basically, I will access this index method first, and then I'm going to access this about and the privacy method, and finally I'm going to delete the cookie using the delete cookie method. So basically, I'm just trying to make you understand what exactly the cookie, how it is work. In our coming session, I'm going to use this concept by taking some real-time applications, right? So, but for now,
Okay.
you just need to understand how exactly the cookie work in a web application. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sir, one doubt, sir.
Yes.
So suppose some people they hack our browser session, right? So if a cookie is stored in our machine and they hack it, and suppose even if I clear my browser cache, but they will have the cookie, right? So in that case, for persistent cookies, will they be able to
No.
access?
If you clear your browser cookies, then everything is going to be deleted.
So from in the server side also it will be deleted. So they cannot misuse our.
See, in this case, we are not storing anything on the server. So in the case of cookies, right, the information is going to be stored in the client machine only. There is, in this case, am I tell anything that the cookie is going to stored in the server? Server
No,
is
sir,
only
but there will be a
responsible.
connection. There will be a connection between the cookie and the session state, right? To
Session
identify
state
next
is
time.
same. First of all, you need to understand cookie is different, session state is different. Cookie, it is going to stored on the client machine. Session, it is going to stored on the server. Right? So currently we are explaining the cookie concept, right? So in this case, it is going to stored in the client browser. Next, I'm going to explain the session. At that time, it is going to stored on the server. Then I will make you a difference. What is the difference between cookie and the server? When to use what?
Okay, sir. But my question is, suppose if someone steals our cookies from the browser, Like if I click some malicious link or something and they steal the cookie, so they can misuse, right? So even if I clear the cookie from the browser,
this is the reason why I'm also going to tell you. This is the reason why if you are using cookies and sessions, they are not secure.
okay.
You need to handle it carefully. You should not store any sensitive information in the cookies or in the session.
Okay. Okay.
Right? Because there, if you are storing something in the client side, then it is not secure. And in the case of cookies, it is going to be stored in plain text. Anybody can see what is the user ID, what is the username, all this information. There's no security.
Okay.
Right? So you should avoid using this. But yes, some of the information, like suppose you are visiting any website and you are adding some item into the shopping cart. You close this. After 1 month, you again visit. Then you will see those items are still there in the cart. Why? Because they are using this cookies concept internally. But that will not impact, that will not harm anything, right? So this is not a sensitive information. But if you are storing credit card information, user ID, password, right? These are sensitive information. You do not store them inside cookies or server. Clear?
Okay. Okay. Sure.
Right. So this
Sir,
is
I have
how.
one question.
Yes.
Sir, if we are we are using a Google like that, a Gmail like that. So when in that browser it is asking save password, right? So is it related to cookies or that is different concept?
Yes. This is related to cookies. If you do that, then it will store your information in the cookies, and the next time onward, whenever you come, then automatically it will fill the data and it will give you that option so that you can immediately set these things, right? It is related to cookies.
But in that there is no expire date, right? Expire.
Sorry?
In that there is no expire.
No, see, I'm saying a long life cookies. So if you set this as 1000 days, right, then what will happen? There's no, you can say, don't say that there is no expire time. There is expire time, but that is internally managed. If I put this as 1000, then after 1000 days, it will ask, no, but who is waiting for 1000 days? Some people are putting this as a 10,000, like this, very, very big number. That means it is not, this cookie is not going to be expired.
Okay.
Clear? Are you getting my point or not? Expert time
Yes.
is there, but they are setting the time that big that you think that there is no expire time.
Okay.
Clear?
When we delete within the browser, the cookie will be automatically deleted, right?
Yes. These are stored in the browser. See, if you clear your browser history and delete the cookies, all these things, next try to log in, it will ask you for the password or not.
Yes.
Yes, this is the reason why, because cookie is deleted, right?
Okay.
So now, once this, then now the next question, how we can access the cookie, right, from a view, right? So basically what we need to do, we need to use IHTTP context accessor, and using this IHTTP context accessor, right, we will get the HTTP context and the request object, and from that we can access the cookies information, right? So first of all, we need to import this Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.HTTP namespace, and this namespace is required because inside this namespace, this IHTTP context accessor implementation is there. Then we need to inject an instance of that IHTTP context accessor. And once we inject an instance of IHTTP context accessor, then using this HTTP context accessor, you can access the HTTP context and the request object, right? So how? HTTP context accessor dot HTTP context dot request, then you can access the cookies, username, user ID, whatever you want, you can do. So let me do these changes. So let me go to the index view, go to the view, and let me replace this code with this one. So first of all, I am importing this namespace because this interface belongs to this namespace. Then I'm injecting this one. So by default, one default implementation of this HTTP what I can say accessor is going to be injected, right? So if you know, in the controller we have discussed, in the constructor we need to inject the dependency object, but inside this view there is no controller, right? There is no constructor. Then how we are going to inject in a dependency object inside a view? By using this add inject model, add inject directive. So using this add inject directive, we are going to inject right an instance, right, which is going to be implemented by this HTTP context accessor. So once the instance is injected, and using this HTTP context accessor instance, right, you can access the context object. From the context object, you can access the request header, and from the request header, you can access the cookies parameter. From the cookies, whatever the user ID, username, right, cookie key you want, you can access. So this is how you can access a cookie from your view, right? Let me do the same thing with the privacy method, right? So I'm also going to do the same thing within the for the privacy method, right? Go to the view and copy paste this thing. I'm also trying to access the username and the user ID from this privacy method. So this is the changes, right? What we need to do, right? But now if you run the application, then you will get one exception. What exception? Right? So we are using this HTTP context, right here inside the view. We are using this HTTP context, right? But do we specify for this HTTP context accessor interface what object the framework need to create? Did we specify that? If you remember in the dependency injection design pattern, right, ASP.NET Core dependency injection, we have specified we have to register the interface and the corresponding class name using the add singleton, add scope, right, add transient. Then only whenever it use that type, either either within the constructor of a class, then automatically the framework going to create an instance and going to inject that instance. Here you can consider this is your constructor. Inside this constructor, we are creating a variable of this type. But do we specify for this type of variable, for this type of for this service type, for this interface, what instance the framework needs to be injected? Do we are we specifying anywhere? Yes or no?
No, sir.
No. That means we definitely need to specify for this interface, right? What object the framework need to inject? Yes or no? So for that purpose, what we need to do, we need to add these statements, right? So basically, if you remember, so how we are going to add? Guys, tell me.
Builder dot services at scope.
So basically, what you need to do, you need to use builder dot services dot add singleton. Add a singleton. I don't want to create that instance for request or for session, right? I want only one request, and that for that purpose, what I need to specify here, guys, tell me. What is the interface
HTTP
name?
content access.
What is the interface name? The interface name is this one. And for this interface, I want to provide an implementation. And the implementation class is this one. So that's it. This is the way we need to register the services or not. You have to use any of the method, add singleton, add scope, add transient. You need to provide the interface name, and then you need to provide the implementer class. Which class that implement this? Now, if you go to this class, then you will see that this class implement the HTTP context accessor, and using this HTTP context. Why we use this HTTP context accessor? Because we need to access this HTTP context object. Because without HTTP context object, if you remember from day one, I'm saying using this HTTP context object only we can access the request and response. So we need to inject as we need to get this HTTP context object. So we need to use, right? We need to use this HTTP context, right? So once we inject this service, then right at runtime, the framework is going to inject an instance of this HTTP context object contextor, and using that instance, you can access this HTTP context object, right? If you go to this class, right, then you will see that this class having this HTTP context. So using this HTTP context, you can access the request parameter, right? If you see the request parameter. So using this request parameter, you can access the cookies and all these things. Clear, guys?
Sir, one question, sorry. We are using singleton pattern, right, for this HTTP context. So only one object or one, it is like a static, it will be shared by all the requests. So suppose one user
it is like singleton design pattern. In this case, what will happen? So you just tell me, do we need to create an instance for request for session in this case? Is that required to create an context object, right, for each request, or one context? Once we create one context object, I want to share that context object irrespective of the number of requests. That will improve my application.
But another user is also accessing simultaneously.
See, in that case, this context object is not related to the client side. So whenever the request comes, we need one instance. Using that instance, we need to access the request object, right? So for that purpose, we need this object. So any number of requests for whichever the user doesn't matter. Using this object, we can access the request parameters.
Okay.
Right. So once we have done this, right, then we need to run the application. Right, we are getting the data, but to make you understand, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this new incognito mode. I'm opening this network tab and I'm making this request to the index action method, right? Right. So in this case, if you look at this local host, right? If you look at this local host, this is nothing but this is the index action method of your home controller. Right? And here you will see there is something called a set cookie. Yes or no? Set cookie is there. In the response header, set cookie is there or not?
Yes.
And here you can see how many cookie we have set inside our index action method.
2 cookies.
One is for what is the key name, one is user ID, and another one is username. So are you getting the same user ID key and user ID name? Yes or no?
Yes.
And the corresponding value is there or not? When the cookie is going to be expired, that time also it is showing or not? Path means from anywhere you can access this, right? So you are getting the cookie information. The client in the client side, this cookie is going to store or not?
Yes.
Right? And who stored all this information? Server only. Server only stored this information in the response header, so that in the client side, this information is going to be stored on the client machine. So using the set cookie, the number of right, so the number of cookie you add, all this is going to be stored on the client machine. So how? In the form of a key value pair, right? And this is going to be for the first time, only one time. And in this case, if you look at this request header, right? So now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to click on the privacy page, right? Once I click on the privacy page, then you will see I'm getting the data as expected. I'm getting the data as expected. But in the response header, did you see, is it setting the cookie information? No. But still we are getting the data. But if you look at the request header, right? If you look at the request header, it is using something called the cookie. Yes or no?
Yes.
So in the cookie, it is setting the user ID and the username parameter values or not?
Yeah. So the browser is sending back.
Exactly. Now, if you look at this image, so the first request, whenever the first request comes to the server will send the response. Along with the response, it will set the cookie using the set cookie parameter in the request response header. That is what first we have seen. Yes or no?
Yes.
When the next request is sent by the client is going to send the request along with the cookie in the request header, only one cookie that is going to contain all the key value pair, right? So now if you see, this is my request header using one cookie, it is sending all the key value pair or not? Yes or no?
Yes. Yes, sir.
But in the response header, did the server return the set cookie again?
No.
No. So if you
So
look at
any
this email,
subsequent, okay, any subsequent request, the cookie is sent with the in the request header.
Exactly,
But the
exactly.
response is a HTTP response again.
Right, it is an HTTP request. Response means what? A request is going to be through your HTTP protocol. First request, the cookie is set by the server, sent in the response header. That using the set cookie, and those information are going to be stored on the client machine using the key value pair. And again, from the next request onward, the client is going to send those cookie information using the cookie property in the request header, and the user and the server is going to use server is going to use the HTTP context dot request dot cookies collection to read the user ID and the username. Now, if you look, so here I'm using this request dot cookies. Here I can directly access the request object and cookies, and from this cookies, whatever the username, that what I can access. From the view, if you want, then you have to use HTTP context layer, accessor, HTTP context object, then request, then cookies. So this is how you can write, you can read and write. Now, again, if I go to the privacy page, right, then again also you will see the set cookie is there, right? Set cookie is sending to the user, but no response header. Now I have also another method, right? What is that method? About method. If I again visit to this about method, then also you will see that it is going to make an HTTP request, right? It is going to get the data, right? You can see the data is as it is. But again, if you go to this, then you will see the response header, it is not sending the cookie information, right? Again, if you go to this cookie information, it is getting the data, right? Now I'm going to, again, I'm visiting to the home index, right? If you go to the home index method, then also you can see it is setting the cookie, because in the index method, we are setting the cookie. Yes or no?
Means before expiring also every time it will set the cookie.
No, it is not. See, in this case, we are setting the cookie inside this index method.
Yeah, first time whenever.
No, first time means what? So you need to understand login. How many times you will log in? One time you log in, right? Then again you can access the application any number of times. Again you log out. Log out means in that case you need to call this delete cookie method, and again you log in. So in this case we are not providing that, but here we are adding, right? So in this case what it will do, in this case as many times you are calling this append method user ID and cookie, it is going to add the cookie into the response header.
But the client will set only once, right?
Sorry?
But the client will set the cookies only once, right? In the entire application.
So I'm not getting, client will set the cookie only once for the entire application. What it means? Cookie is going to be set by the cookie is only going to be sent by the server, not by the client. Cookie is going to be set by the server, and that cookie is going to be used by the client. Right? In this case, you are not confusing, because I'm not modifying the value. If I modify this value, then this updated value will be returned to the client with this user ID and username. Clear?
So every time the action method calls, the cookie will get set. Is it? This action method, index action method.
Okay, in this case, I'm calling this action method. But let me assume that once you log into your Facebook account, right, for the login code, what they have written, whenever you click on the login button, whatever code they have written, do you think that each time you visit the application, that logic is going to be executed again and again?
Until log out, it won't get executed.
Yeah, so that functionality we have not provided here. But once you log out and again you log in, then definitely once you call the logout method, definitely that cookie is going to be deleted, right? And then again you call the login method, means this logic is going to be implemented. Here we are not provided that functionality. I'm directly accessing this method. This is the reason why you are able to see this. Okay, let me do one thing, right? So what I'm going to do, home slash, I'm calling this delete cookie. Think that this is your logout method. Cookies are deleted. If you open this one, right, then you will see response header, right? That user ID deleted, username deleted, yes or no? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now,
Because of the expiry date.
Sorry? Expiry date is set to something which is not exist. 1970, is that date exist?
Yeah, that is why it is deleted.
Sorry?
The expiry date is set to, the expiry date was set to 1970. Yeah.
Right, which is invalid date, which you can't use.
Yes.
Right? Right.
Yes.
So now, if you try to access the about method, do you think that this information I will get? Home about. Let me access this one and go to the about. So in this case, go to the request header. In this request header, did you find that the cookie information anymore?
No.
In the response header, did it set the cookie information?
No.
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 Now if I visit to the home controller index action method, then again it will set all these things. Right? If you go to this, you can see this set cookie is there. Now is that clear?
Yes.
Any doubt from anyone?
Sir, can you explain about the
Sorry?
About
means?
that method.
I'm not getting what you are saying. Can you please speak loudly?
Can you go to the controller?
Sorry?
That about when you call the about controller.
So your voice is not audible to me. Guys, anyone able to listen her voice clearly?
No, it is not clear.
Hello?
Not clear.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yes. So what is there inside about method? You just tell me. Is there anything special which you want to understand? Okay, in this case, whenever I call the about method, if the cookie is available with this name in the request header, that value will be come here. Otherwise, it will be null. Same in this case also. If the value is available, it will be retrieved. Otherwise, it is going to be null. But I don't understand what you want to, what you are not getting inside this about method.
Inspect. I wanted to see in the inspect, sir.
Inspect, right? Okay. So we have already set the cookie, right? And we have already set the cookie. Now, if you go to the inspect element, then you will get the data. So you will see already in the previous request, the server sent the cookie information. Now in the request header, if you go, you will see that cookie information is being sent by the client to the server. The inspect element is going to be same for each request. It matters whichever cookie is, if the cookie is set by the server, that cookie information you will find in the response header. If the cookie is being sent by the client, then that information you will find in the request header. And here, one cookie is for all the key value pair, and for whenever the server sending the cookie information, for cookie, one key is there. Right? So cookie is set cookie, one set cookie for one key value pair. Clear, guys? Clear or not?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you go to code once? Just wondered what is the type of that request dot cookie?
What is the type? Means it's a I request cookie collection. It's a collection.
No, request. Only
Request means
request. Yeah.
HTTP context, na? HTTP context. That is the reason after 10, 15 classes, if you are asking, sir, what is the type, then what I can say? From the day one, I'm saying every component in .NET Core application can access the request and response. This is because of this HTTP request object, right? And this is available. And if you remember, while we are discussing the in-process and out-of-process hosting, at that time I explained this HTTP context object is sent by the server to the middleware component. And this HTTP context object contains all the information related to a request, right? What is the request type? What is the method name, right? What is the request parameter, request body, request header? All information is available within the HTTP context object. And that context object we are simply using here. Because this object is available to all the middleware component, and this is nothing but one action method, and it is also part of your middleware component only. Clear?
Yes.
Yes or no? So basically, don't think that it is something new which I am not explaining. It is already explained in the previous sessions. Right? At that time, because this request object and this response object, right? If you go and check the type is going to be HTTP request and HTTP response. Whenever the request coming, at that time it is HTTP request. Whenever we are sending the response, then at that time it is HTTP response, right? And this HTTP request object, response object, right, are access to each component, right? Each middleware component.
Okay, yeah. It is a part of controller base. Yeah, okay, understood.
It is not part of a controller. Don't consider that it is part of your controller, right? It is sent by this HTTP context object is sent by the server only, right? And you can access that from anywhere, right? It is not only related to this one, even though in the program class also I can access that HTTP context, and we have already seen those things, right? I'm not going to discuss those things again, but now this is all about how you can access the cookie in your application, right? So actually there are some time, right? So basically, what are cookies used for? Session management, right? Personalization, tracking, user authentication, remember me functionality, user preferences, shopping carts, right? These are the different scenarios where you can use this cookie mechanism, right? Suppose you want to store some login information, right? Suppose you are visiting some sports news sites, then immediately, right, later you will visit, you will see some of the ads, right? Some of the articles related to that particular topics what you visit, right? Even though personalized, whatever you visit, search mostly on internet, right? Then you will get those kind of things in the advertising, right? So all these things you will get. User authentication, if you want to identify whether a user is logged in user or not, you can use remember me functionality, right? If you know what is remember me, whenever we are creating one website, one checkbox we have given remember me. That means if you check the remember me functionality, then we are going to store the login information inside the cookie, and we are going to set, right? So these are the shopping carts. If you visit any shopping sites, right? If you are storing some items into the cart, then those items will be available for a longer period of time, and this is because of this what I can say, cookies. But mindful, but the point that you need to remember while using cookie is security, right? Using cookies cross-site scripting attack. So this is right. What I can say, this is I'm giving as a one task, right? This is not new to ASP.NET Core. So guys, please provide some information to me. I know what is cross-site scripting attacks, right? But I want you guys to give some information to me. What exactly cross-site scripting attack, right? You have to provide some information in the .NET discussion group, right? And you should not store some sensitive information directly in the cookie, right? Sensitive information means you should not store credit card information, your password information. You should not store all these things inside your, what I can say, cookies, right? So the guys, can you have another 30 minutes so that I can complete this session management today?
Pranay.
Yes, we have.
right?
Can
Because
you show in,
sorry.
Just do you want to continue 30 minutes again from now, or is there any break?
So if you guys want some 10 minutes break, that is also fine to me. So can we take a sorry? Can we take a 10 minutes break and we'll back at 9 a.m. and complete that other concept sessions?
Otherwise, can you tell tomorrow on Saturday?
Is I want to start a new concept from Monday, right? Because this is the last piece of information in data management techniques, right? And then from Monday, I want to start what I can say routing concept. So if you have 30 minutes, then we can continue. Otherwise, I can move this to Monday.
Sir, you can take on tomorrow also, no issue.
Saturday we can have a session.
Sorry, Saturday I can take because Saturday and Sunday it's family time only.
Tomorrow you can tell for half an hour or 1 hour. Now we need to go to office.
See, tomorrow one day I can't spend 30 minutes. If you guys want, right, then right, I don't like to take a 30-minute session on tomorrow. Those who are attending my previous sessions, right, Saturday and Sunday, I at least take a 3-hour session with 10 minutes break. Yes, okay, fine. We'll continue the rest of the things on Monday, right? So because most of the people are working professional, they have to do that work, and even attending 2.5 hour session is very difficult, right? So session concept and what is the difference between cookies and session, right? We will discuss Monday. Right, that's it.
Sir, can you
So,
show this the inspect element? How did you get that page? I didn't see. The inspect element, yes. How did you get this page?
so just open browser developer tool. Do you know what is browser developer tool?
Yes, it is in Google.
Yeah, just press F12, go to network tab, and just and whenever you make a request, right, that request information you will show here. Just click on this, and then you will go to the header, and you
Yes,
can.
cookie details. You are getting the cookie details. For every page we are requesting, we can get the same thing, right? Whether we are visiting any website or your website, and then we can get the cookie detail like this.
It's basically specific to the website, right? If I'm visiting this website, I'm getting this one. If I'm visiting a different website, in a different website, do you think that this user ID and name password is there required?
No, it depends which website we are accessing, and the website requires some user ID and password. Corresponding to that, it will send that, it will post here the user ID and password.
It is basically related to website only. And here you can say the request URL is there. If you visit a different website, a different URL you will find. And
Right.
how you can think that this different URL it is going to send these informations?
Sir, is the cookie information encrypted in general, or is it be plain?
No. Okay, information is not encrypted. It is in plain text. This is the reason why it is very dangerous from the security point of view. Right? Even yes, once we discuss the other part, right, sessions, at that time the information what session is going to send to the client, that is going to be encrypted.
Sir, what is long-term cookies and short-term cookies? This one
See,
is long-term cookie.
Yeah, long-term cookies means what I can say, the expert time is going to be very big. In this case, you can set 7 days, 15 days, 1,000 days. It's up to you. Short-term cookies are nothing but your session you can consider. Short-term cookies is not nothing but your session cookies, right? In that case, as long as your session is available, you can access. Once you close the browser, the session is going to the cookie is going to be deleted. Even if you are inactive for some time, then also your what I can say that cookie is going to be deleted, right? For example, if you visit any banking website, net banking website, then if you inactive for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, then again once you click any of the link, it will redirect you to the login page. Why? Because the duration of the session cookies, right, are very less. Right? If you inactive for some minutes, some seconds, right, then it is going to delete the cookies. That is nothing but your session cookies. That is what we are going to discuss next.
Sir, how it works in incognito window? Will it be the same or?
Right. So for each, see, it is inconvenient, even though if you use your browser, then also it is going to same. I don't think that it is going to be different, right? So my application is running, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm clicking on this home button. Now you can see, go to this one and you can see set cookies there, right? All this thing is there. So incognito or it's a different browser, that doesn't matter. What is the advantage is incognito mode means once I close this, all this information is going to be lost. Right, but this is not incognito mode means it is going to accept, and later if you access, then also it will get the cookie information, right?
So in
generally,
incognito.
so generally what I suggest is if you are using some, right, some other laptop, right, other machine, try to do any kind of activity, please use incognito mode. Don't use that main browser. Why? Because the cookie information is stored there, right? If they can visit and inspect and they can check what is the details, all these things, if the site is not secure. But once you use this, what I can say, incognito mode, then once you close the browser, everything is gone.
So
right?
the long-term cookie, though you say 7 days or 1,000 days, that will be gone, right?
It is not going to be there in the incognito mode, right? It will be there in the normal mode. This is the reason why incognito mode is there. If there is no difference, then why they are providing this incognito mode? Clear?
Yeah, sir. Sir, one more question, sir. Maybe off topic. You said for shopping, adding to cart the items that